Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. In this game we're playing Haqqislam versus Bakunin, newly updated Bakunin, in a custom scenario, Clighly Hassified. I'm not having a stroke, that's the name of the scenario. It is a play on Highly Classified, and it is a fan remake of said scenario. To explain how it works, it is scored in exactly the same way as Highly Classified, but rather than having 4 random classifieds drawn at the beginning of the game before rolling for first player. Instead, after rolling to determine who is going first, but before selecting deployment zones, players draft the classifieds that will be the common classifieds. Each player, beginning with the first player and alternating, will draft a classified until 4 have been selected along the middle, meaning that it varies significantly from regular classified in that there is no randomness or variance. You will still have a randomly selected private classified, but you can control half of the classifieds that come out in the flop, which means you can tailor your list to an extent to some of what you know is coming. It provides a lot more player control, but it is very much about, and this is easy sort of not to realize at first glance, what it does in particular is it incentivizes or it rewards building and drafting in a way that kind of denies your opponent ability to do classifieds more than just to do them yourself. For example, you might be a Nomad player. That doesn't necessarily mean that you want to pick telemetry as one of the classifieds in the flop, because telemetry is kind of easy for everyone to do. But say you're playing against a Haqqislam player, maybe putting test run down, and they might put down experimental drug, because those are things that are not each easy for the other player to do. I think it's an interesting scenario, and I think it is in some respects an improvement on Highly Classified. In particular, it's an improvement on Highly Classified for the purposes of playing a game in a tournament kind of in round 3 or beyond, where what you want is a tighter, more competitive, more controlled play experience. But I think for general purposes, Highly Classified for casual play, pick-up play at the store, Highly Classified is probably better. And the reason for that is Clighly Hassified is a classic example of kind of player-driven design, where, and this is a known design phenomenon, if you take player feedback and you ask players what it is that they want to change about the game and you ask them to be specific, very, very often the feedback that is given is that players request that games remove variance, randomness, and friction. Because as a player, those are things that frustrate us to have to overcome. But from a design perspective, variance, randomness, and friction are often essential design elements because variance and randomness produce novelty and different play experiences, and friction is what the players have to contend with and be challenged by. And so something is kind of lost if you remove variance, for example, from a game. You have to be very careful when you do so. To give kind of a worked example, in Highly Classified, if you have the same 2 players with the same 2 lists play Highly Classified 1,000 times, you will not often see a repeat of the same classifieds because the probability space is massive. Just for those 4 in the center, it's like 1 in 20. It's 1 in 20 times 1 in 19 times 1 in 18 times 1 in 17. It's a huge possibility space. Whereas after a certain number of games, the same players with the same lists playing Clighly Hassified, you will eventually have the same classifieds every game. From probably like game 909, game 10 through 1000, you will have the same classifieds. And so that's what I mean. It is kind of a classic example of player-driven design. It is interesting, and I think it's different to Highly Classified and therefore good. It's interesting, it's fun, it makes a good variation mission. And I also do think it is better for playing, if you are a competitive player who wants a competitive experience, it's better for that. But I don't think it replaces Highly Classified. I think it would actually serve excellently if they were to incorporate it into the ITS pack as a variant in Highly Classified itself, where there was Highly Classified baseline and then like 2 variants with different levels of player control over the classifieds. In any case, that's enough editorializing. With all that in mind, let's look at the list that I played and the list that my opponent played. So here's the list that I played for this mission, and again, bear in mind it is built for Clighly Hassified. It is not a standard Haqqislam list in any stretch of the imagination, but it is doing some things that are different and which I kind of wanted to test in any case. Now, okay, we have 2 Muqtars in here. No prizes for, Muqtars in a list. They are good and they are standard and they are normal. I like these 2 Muqtar profiles. I will usually take an MSV Muqtar and I will often take a Muqtar Hacker. And the Muqtar Hacker is just a machine in Highly Classified and Clighly Hassified. It can do many, many classifieds. It's a forward deploying, decharge, hacker capable of doing forward observing and hacking, elite troop, it's exceptional. We then have Rouhani, who is a doctor as well as being a character and therefore a veteran troop. Fiddler, who is an engineer and therefore an engineer as well as a veteran troop because she's a character. Alibertos, Zulekia, who is a character, and then 2 Coom Riders with light shotguns. And then in Combat Group 2, we have Saladin, 3 Matawiya, all cheap profiles, 2 jammers, 1 smoke grenade, and then 3 Hassassin Rajiks. 1 is a hacker, and 2 are regular rifle light shotguns. Now, 3 Rajiks is kind of a little stupidly all in on a bit, but there is definite method behind this list's madness. But there's something I've been wanting to play with more, kind of anyway. The hacker is a Whip 15 medium infantry veteran, dogged, veteran as in the troop type, dogged hacker. It's excellent. And for 26 points, rifles, light shotguns, decent stats, like Rajiks feel like they just kind of should be good. It's just that how do you put them in a list without having like support web for them and telegraphing their presence? And in particular, it's a little weird in this case, but the Rajiks are displacing Hassassin for days. But that is very intentional, and I think definitely necessary in this particular case, in this particular scenario. If I ran this list in a tournament that was running Clighly Hassified, it would probably be only for that scenario. This is not a good list for general purposes, but it is a good list for this scenario. We'll talk about why at about the halfway point in the game. If you've noticed why, keep that to yourself for you now. Don't post it in the comments yet, because we've got something I want to talk about and maybe pose a puzzle to players. Next, let's talk about the Bakunin list. So this is the Bakunin list that my opponent played, and I may not have the combat groups right, but I'm quite confident in the troop profiles, and I like it a lot. I think Bakunin has not had its power level overall risen. Someone showed me a Bakunin list that they had written after the game tonight, actually, and I almost said we should play a second game just so I can post a troll battle report, Haqqislam versus new Bakunin, because it literally included 0 new profiles. Turns out Riot Girls are still probably the best thing in the sectoral. Riot Girls are excellent. The only thing about the list that was different from before is that Branda Castro is a new and special kind of terror. But this is doing new things. It's leaning into the new stuff, and I do still like it a lot. So we've got Zoe, Pywell, and some moderators. This can form a 4 model link, but in practice it's going to be a 3 model link because the rest of the combat group is a 4 model link of reference. We have a Moira HMG, a KHD Custodia, Mother Agatha, and a Cenobite, the excellent heavy rocket launcher light shotgun profile. I would love another Cenobite in this list, and this just to make it a 5-strong combat group, 5-strong link team, but even as a 4-strong link team, this is very, very good. We also have a Chimera because Chimeras are excellent, a Vertigozon because Vertigozons are excellent, and then Robin Hook because Robin Hook is excellent, 2 Morlocks because Morlocks are excellent, and then 2 Zeros. These Zeros could potentially have been something like Initiated Observance, but again, Zeros are still a fantastic profile. A hacker in this scenario is really useful, a mine layer helps a lot, particularly in terms of like defense. The Cenobite adds a fair bit of defense because she has a light shotgun, 2 wounds, core linked, etc. But there is still there's vulnerable single wound stuff here. And we'll see this in deployment. Having a mine layer just shielding the link team as a little bit of insurance is really good. So we roll for seeing who is going first, and I lose the roll. With Whip 16 versus 13, I roll a 19, my opponent rolls a 3. And so he decides that he is going first because I am playing Haqqislam, and that's eminently sensible to do, particularly in this scenario. Think, for example, if he picks Test Run, he has 1 engineer, and if I have a Hassassin for day and I kill his engineer on the first turn, I've locked him out of that. That's something that can also happen in highly classified, but it's kind of like potentially more likely to occur in this scenario. So he snap picks first turn. We then do our classifieds. The first thing he plays is Test Run, so that's the first classified that will be chosen. I then pick in Extremis Recovery. He then picks Hack the HVT Espionage, and I pick Extreme Prejudice. He then draws, I believe, and for the purposes of this battle report, I think he may have made a mistake in terms of duplicating classifieds, but let's just say for this battle report, he gets Predator. Predator is a very good classified to get alongside in Extreme Prejudice because you can do it kind of at the same time. You will get Predator in the activation. You get half a Predator in the activation that you do a coup de grace. And then the one that I draw is Follow-Up, which is medium or heavy infantry in zone of control of the HVT, which thanks to those Hassassin Rajiks, I can do very easily. Let's jump to the table. I will, by the way, put those classifieds in the video description just so you can refer to them. So here's the table. My opponent is deploying first, I'm deploying second, he takes 2 reserves, I take 2 reserves, and my 2 reserves are going to be Fiddler and Saladin. I don't know that he doesn't have Brander Castro. I would be playing Brander Castro in his shoes for the same reason that a Haqqislam player might be expected to play a Fidei, and so I've chosen to reserve drop Saladin and Fiddler. A Libertos can kind of be used as a counter deployment to Brander Castro, but because he's a camouflage marker, you can't box him in with a mine because you can't mine layer near the camouflage marker. Fiddler, on the other hand, can deploy her jackbots very aggressively to pick it, and Saladin I just want to keep safe because I kind of need him alive. In terms of the Bakunin deployment, the reserve drops were Robin Hook and the Uberfall Commando, which I think are excellent reserve drops just in general, and Robin Hook as a reserve drop is really scary. We are playing with building interiors here, which is why some rooftops are off, but I will describe what's going on. So we have Robin Hook as a reserve drop on this rooftop, and the Uberfell kind of has deployed down here, against a nominally clear coast. In this building, we have the moderators. Basically, the moderators are back here and here, and then we have Zoe and Pywell forming up in a Harry's team of 1 moderator, Zoe and Pywell. And then we have the Observance Core over here. Cenobite, Custodia, Moira, and Mother Agatha. There's 1 Morlock there, there's 1 Morlock there, and then we have camouflage markers. So I mentioned that there's we've got the 0 hacker right there, and then we have 2 camouflage markers kind of hanging out in this space, shielding, if in case the observance link never moves, they are protecting the observance link against irregular chain rifle wielding attacks. Because as much as the Cenobite has 2 wounds and Agatha has no wounding count, other models in that link are still vulnerable. Importantly, my opponent's HVT is here. Now, my opponent putting his HVT here opens up a very refused flank deployment from me, because consider there are, like, my private classified is follow up, which is around the HVT, and we have hack the HVT on the table. So I put my HVT here, and then I focus basically the entirety of my deployment on this space. We do put off to the flank, there's a Coom Rider and a Matawiya with light shotgun, with chain rifle here. That's just to provide something, a threat from this direction, so that this part of the table can't be completely ignored. And then otherwise everything is in and around here. We have the Mukhtar hacker there, the Libertos and its mine there. We have Matawiya jammer there, Matawiya jammer there. Fiddler has gone down on the roof, but her jackbots are in picket locations. So they are watching to take shotgun attacks should things move too close, because this is a quite null deployment. And you need some AROs, right? I'm looking to project shotgun shots out to here, and out to here, and even out to here, because you need some AROs. You cannot ever, you really should not totally null deploy. You want to project your threat sort of like 8 to 16 inches. The close ranges, the terminal approaches to a deployment zone should always be guarded. We then have a Coom Rider inside the building, Zulekia here, the Mukhtar MSV back here because there was really no way good for it forward. Rouhani has deployed there, and then Saladin is literally all the way back there. And the reason he is all the way back there is that Robin Hook has come down as the reserve, and there is a picture over here, and I want to be as far as possible from both as I can be. I want there to be no circumstance where Pywell's picture, Robin Hook, or the observance link can get a picture onto Saladin and missile him to death, because I have significant plans for my first turn. And if Saladin dies, they will be much, much more challenging. So here, distance and all of this insulation is protecting him. He will never be attacked, he will be safe the entire game, and I have made him my reserve drop for that reason. Here is a better picture of what I mean by this deployment. He is literally hanging out like as far back in the table and still in cover as he could be. I don't even have him deployed here, because that would mean that a pitcher that landed inside the building could potentially get him in zone of control. He is absolutely as far back and prone and safe as can be. And we can see again here, like, all of the weight of stuff that is in between him and me, and watching my HVT here. So the Bakunin first turn begins, and I choose to strip orders from the combat group with Robin Hook and the Vertigo Zond and the Morlocks in it. Because those are the pieces, if he attacks with a big heavy element or even with the Uberfall Commando, I think I'm fine. I am significantly more concerned about stuff like Robin Hook and the camouflage markers moving forward and attacking. In particular, I also suspect this of being a hacker. based on its positioning, where it is, what it's doing. It's on a rooftop, projecting zone of control. And what I do not want is this hacker moving forward and doing a classified on my HVT. If push comes to shove, I may want to move this HVT back by synchronizing with it, perhaps with Zelekia. This is probably within 8 inches, so I just don't want him to be able to easily get HVT espionage. I want to hold that off for now. For my opponent's part, what he decides to do is basically make an attack. The impetuous things will move forward. Smoke goes down. Right, I've got multiple models off of the table, and so Nadir are a distinct possibility. So smoke comes down in positions that will enable there and there that will enable the Custodia link to move up this direction. And this is basically the attack path. Uber4 Commando will move up and occupy this space here. Basically just kind of chill out there. Her order will eventually get converted to allow more stuff from the Moiras. And the Moiras will move up this direction. They will do a few things, actually. Basically, they will take several fights with these pieces here, kill the Coom Rider, and engage the Matawiya. They will also, one of them will come in through this doorway, peek out there, and pop pitches down here and here. And it will take several orders, because a Mukhtar is a very good hacker, in particular it's a very robust hacker, but they will eventually, over a course of about 3 orders, Trinity the Mukhtar to death. So the Mukhtar is dead, the Coom Rider is dead, and the Matawiya is engaged in close combat, and that link team is kind of like in this position here. Had they had a few more orders, they could potentially have pushed even further, like down here, maybe onto this building. And a heavy rocket launcher or a HMG there would not quite have line of sight, for example, to Rouhani, but it would have line of sight and have this Mukhtar out of cover, and that would be really quite bad. This would be an annoying bracketing position that I would struggle to push into. I think Fiddler, these crates are not that high. This is 1 crate high, this is 2. So I think Fiddler would be safe, for example, but pushing into a link team occupying this space would have been considerably more dangerous. So the stuff that I put here, not as a distraction, but as a threat on this flank, kind of held. But quite importantly, no classifieds have been accomplished. My turn begins and I'm down 1 irregular and 1 regular order, which actually leaves me with very few orders because so much of my stuff is off the table. After moving some things between groups with Saladin, I have something like 4 irregular and 4 regular in the first combat group, and 2 regular and 3 irregular or 4 irregular in the second combat group. It isn't a ton. I'm going to spend all of my command tokens this turn, but I'm going to heavily and aggressively pursue the mission. So we take our impetuous. This Matawiya stands up and kills one of these repeaters, but doesn't get the other. That's fine. And then this Matawiya moves around here, takes a pistol shot against a Pupnik, doesn't kill it. That's fine. And then we begin the push. And in particular, we begin the push with Rajiks. The first Rajik will turn up here, out of line of sight of everything. That actually, when it activates, and then when it turns up, and then when it activates, that lets me know effectively that the table edge is safe from zone of control of this model, which I remember I suspect of being a hacker, and the Rajik completes follow-up on the Bakunin HVT, which is over there. So that's the first Rajik that arrives. The second Rajik, the hacker, walks on here, now that I know that is safe, and it completes HVT espionage. So that's 2 classifieds done. I then move in this direction here. I should take a wound from a Morlock over here and go dogged, but I fail my guts, move around this way, and in the same order, I take a face-to-face roll with, take a fight with Pywell over here, who shoots me twice with his combi rifle, and I shotgun back and put to unconscious level 2. So with a long-range assault pistol and 2 combi shots, the Rajik goes dogged but doesn't die, and then it walks up here and does coup de grace on Pywell. It gets I should actually have done in Extremis recovery. I got them done in the wrong order, but I do coup de grace on Pywell, killing Pywell and dying to the Morlock in the same order. So that's 1 Rajik down, but I'm now on 3 classifieds complete. The entire rest of the turn is Bikers, Matawiya, and the Libertos pushing in this direction, basically having a big slap fight with the Uberfell Commando. But at the conclusion of that long slugfest, a couple of Pupniks are dead, but importantly, one of them gets in Extremis recovered by this biker. So I've done 4 classifieds. I cannot do test run, but I have completed in Extremis recovery on a Pupnik, extreme prejudice on Pywell, and I have done both HVT espionage and follow up on the Nomad HVT over here. At this point, we're about 20 minutes into the video, we're going to pause and I'm going to present kind of like a puzzle if people would like to try and solve it. I'll give the answer at the end of the video, so I'll put timestamps in. If you are not interested in, if you're interested in trying to solve the puzzle, I'll present it now, as in what should the Nomad player be doing here, and if you're just interested in the tactical situation, what the answer is, watch all the way through to the end. So the puzzle that I kind of want to present here, the tactical question is, the Haqqislam player turn has just ended, the Nomad player turn has begun. We have, if you'll recall, a Nomad, an unwounded Nomad link team of a Cenobite, Agatha, Amoira, and Wabara. We have a dead Uberfell commando, we have dead Pywell, but Zoe is alive back here, Morlocks are in various positions, and the two HVTs are there and there. This is the Haqqislam one. Assuming that for the remainder of the game, Haqqislam models declare 0 AROs, they don't even dodge, and that the Nomad's private objective for purposes of this is Predator, how should the Nomad player play out his turn? Or even his remaining 2 turns? Because there is kind of an objectively correct answer, because the game state is actually irrecoverable at this point. There is something there, like the Nomad player has a course of action that they should be pursuing, but the game state is complete and decided. The Haqqislam player, in this case me, can declare no AROs for the entire rest of the game and still win. So those are your 2 questions. Why has the Haqqislam player won the game at this point, and what should the Nomad player be doing? We're at 21 and 50 seconds. I'm going to give you the answer now, if you're interested. Otherwise, post in the comments below, what has happened here? What has happened in this game that the Haqqislam list has made occur? So here's the answer. Spoiler alert for those who would like to pursue the puzzle. You will recall that the classifieds that I picked were Extreme Prejudice and In Extremis Recovery. Both of those can only be completed on an unconscious trooper. Literally the entirety of the Haqqislam list is dogged or no wound incapacitation, meaning that, or explodes, because Fiddler's 2 jackpots don't have dogged or no wound incap, but they do blow up. This list will never, under any circumstances, if I don't choose to, leave behind a corpse, which means that I've done 4 classifieds and my opponent can, at most, for the entire rest of the game, do 3, and if I don't ARO against anything, he can do 2, because he will never have a model with structure to repair. The game is, for all intents and purposes, complete. The absolute most points that can be scored are to complete Predator by killing this Morlock over here, this Matawi over here with a Cenobite, and then moving up to kill whatever else is interesting. Probably the easiest 2 things would be Rouhani and the Matawi on the rooftop. Kill those and you have a bonus point out of Predator, and the only remaining thing to do is to use this 0 hacker on the rooftop to to espionage the HVT. That puts the Nomad player on, I think it's 3 points for having done the private classified, plus a bonus 1 is 4, plus scan the HVT is 5, which is the most that can be accomplished by the Nomad player for the remainder of this mission, against the 9 that the Haqqislam player has gotten by doing 4 classifieds, including the private one. So really your goal, if you find yourself in, not necessarily this situation specifically, because this is unlikely to materialize in many games, because Clighly Hassified is a unique example of what happens when variance is removed from a game. You end up with solvable situations, but also because I have been asked and agreed never to play this list again in this scenario. I made my point and I don't need to do it again. And in fact, generally, I would kind of discourage people from playing this list in the scenario, because ultimately we are here kind of to have a good time and to play. And yes, there is kind of an exploit that exists in the scenario that some factions can complete. Haqqislam probably does it the best, but a lot of factions can do lists that are comprised entirely of no wound and cap dogged models. So I would really just discourage people generally from doing this, but If you do, have a think about how you might counter it. If you suspect your opponents of doing this, think in advance of how you might counter it. The challenge, of course, is that you won't know if this is coming until deployment happens, which means you have to have picked the classifieds already. So really the Nomad player goal in this case is to score the maximum number of OP possible, because that is what affects your placement. You can't win, but you need to try and get as many OP and as many TP as you can, even if you lose. And recognizing this in Infinity in tournaments is actually a really key thing in terms of improving your overall tournament standing. Ultimately, the goal of a tournament is to play and have fun. Secondarily, the objective is to win, but only one player can ever win an event, and it's very, very difficult to do that in a large pool of people who will have varying degrees of luck and skill. There is always going to be someone out there who's better. There's always going to be someone out there who's luckier in an individual event. That's pretty likely. So, making the difference between like 8th place and 4th place can often be just who was the person who recognized that one game that they were losing, and that they could change gears and aim, not necessarily for a win, not necessarily for a Hail Mary, because victory was probably going to be impossible, but that there was a situation where in defeat they could still score the most objective points possible. Because the more objective points you score, that's a tiebreaker. And if you can get either to within 2 points of your opponent or to 5 points or both, those are more tournament points, which are how you place overall. So in this case, kind of the objective answer for the Nomad player is to first complete Espionage HVT, just to secure that 1 point, and then for the rest of the game to complete Predator. And as soon as Predator is complete, just stop. Stop taking fights, stop attacking, stop doing anything that might lose you models, because victory points, i.e. models alive, are the final tiebreaker. It's very, very rare that they will ever materialize, but that is also something to recognize, is that you can reach a point in a game where you actually should just stop, because anything further will just get models killed, and in the unlikely circumstance that there is another player with the same number of tournament points and the same number of objective points as you, it's going to be VPs that makes the tiebreaker. And if you yeet your models to death, on a laugh at the end of a game, you will have fewer VPs, which will change your tiebreak scores. So this is kind of a unique situation. This was a very interesting game. It literally lasted for 1 turn for both players. We declined to play out the Bakunin turn. I don't have any photos of it because we just talked out the circumstance, and my opponent realized kind of like toward the end of my first turn what had happened, and that victory was impossible. And in that, he politely asked that I do not play this list at the Anzac Cup coming up on 14th and 15th, or 15th and 16th of April in Canberra, which I will be attending, and I will not be playing this list. And anyone who does play this list at the Anzac Cup, to quote the immortal words of a Prime Minister of Australia, is a bum. Don't play this. It's an interesting meme. I was glad to try out Rajik's. I think they really do deserve more play than they necessarily get, and I should try them out a little bit more, and I probably will in future, but not in this list configuration. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you've listened all the way to this part, I'm interested to see what comments people make in terms of how the list is to be played and basically what the game solution is. I want to see if anyone proposes something different to me. Or if maybe there is a solution that I haven't realized. I don't think there is one. During the game, I was literally looking up to see if Fiddler was killed and the jackbots went inert, could they be destroyed? And the answer is no, because disconnected, unlike unconscious, does not make automatic skills turn off, which means explode stays active, and you cannot, in any case, you have to coup de grace or in extremis recovery an unconscious model. A model merely being in null state is not sufficient. So you can't in extremis recovery or coup de grace a jackbot if Fiddler is disconnected. That is the only thing I can think of that might have been a way out, and it turns out that it wasn't. So yeah, overall, very interesting game. Only played for 1 turn. Hope you enjoyed this report, and don't play this list. I'll see you next time.